All right. All right, sorry, team. We are starting nearly an hour late. I made the foolish mistake of thinking the delivery place that was mere blocks away, even with the rain, would be able to deliver me food faster than 2 hours. So, we're a little late, but now we're energized. We've gotten some food. My name is Chad. This is Full Circle, episode 33. We're going to talk about some stuff. Again, apologies for being a little late. Just as a thing I want to throw out there, I don't know, I probably lost most of the people who watch live, so if you're catching this later, something I would like to be able to try to do soon is I want to crowdsource some list building. It's not something we've done on here yet. I think it would be a lot of fun. I think it could be insightful. It could help me and you. Probably with a sort of a not, I'm sort of aiming to do more of a non-standard warlock type option. Someone like a Chromac 1 or possibly even Chromac 2, Morvana 1. I have to think about it a little more. Someone like that. Someone in that range. Not to say that we're locked into anyone in particular. Bradigus, maybe. Seen his builds are not all that varied, so maybe not him. And so forth. It's just an idea. I don't know if we'll do it next week or a little later down the road. I would like to give that a shot at some point, though, but I do need a decent number of people in the chat, or it's just me building a list, which could also be interesting, but a little different exercise. As far as news goes, we are in week 2 of the Trencher CID. That launched today. Big buff to Circle as the Stormlances are being toned down. I think that's a big buff to anybody who does not play Signar, and frankly, I think it's actually a buff to people who play Signar because I think it would be in their benefit to start looking at some of the other things in their faction. I do think Lances are, in their current incarnation, too good for their points. And this tone down has probably been quite a while coming, but they decided to go ahead and do that because so many people discussed basically that they're like, well, I'm not going to play Trenchers because why would I? Just playing Stormlance is better than this. And I think for the health of that faction, I think this is a good change. And a lot of people always have that, well, why don't you bring other things up instead of bringing things down? And they address this, but basically, there's like 1,100 entries in the game, and you can't necessarily, I would suggest that the dev team is probably at any given time happy with at least 80% of that. Not to say that everything's perfect or everything is the strongest thing, but that I bet 80% of the stuff falls in the range of good. I've felt like that as I've shared stuff. So, to say why don't we bring other stuff up is just not feasible. It's sort of a nonsensical direction to go. It makes a little more sense to tone down something that is in that 10% outlier in the top to start opening up some of the design space in your faction. And I don't necessarily expect everybody to agree or understand why that's the case, especially if it's one of your favorite units to play or you've had a lot of success with it. I can understand the frustration. I've been there with Circle with more than a few things over the course of time, so be that as it may. But for Circle, it's a little bit of good news. If the changes from this week stick, Lattimore is losing the thing that gives them more damage on the ranged attacks in exchange for Veteran Leader, and the Electroleaps are being removed from both the melee and ranged attacks. So I kind of advocated for removing it from the ranged attacks personally for a while. I think both is still probably good, and they got +1 POW back as it pertains to that. So they're going to be better at getting in on armor, and worse, probably worse at pretty much everything else. They still can harass because they do still have guns, but not as strong. I think they're still very playable, but I don't think they're not a one-stop shop anymore in Signar, hopefully, with those changes. Some more quick announcements. The Primecast announced that the next CID will be the Northkin. And they sort of just brushed on what we're going to see from that. I'm not a Trollblood player, but the stuff they're coming up with sounds really cool. They've got a unit that's got a pair of bears in it that have ambush. Cool. They're reworking Porka 2. They've got a new control-oriented Trollkin shaman sort of warlock coming. From the sounds of things, I expect trolls will be playing her. They've got some light war beasts coming. They've got a battle engine coming, which is this like drunk party wagon sort of thing that's pulled by bears. It all sounds very neat. This is sort of I've certainly talked about this, but my wife, over here. Sorry, I do this wrong every time. Griffin's just painting. This is one of the things I've really loved about the themes, and I know I'm not really talking about Circle here real quick, but just briefly, is the idea that you could play just one theme in a faction, or buy it, or paint it, or whatever you enjoy about the game, and really get a lot out of that. And I really dig the polar bears and the frozen north aspect of Trollbloods, and I don't really like a lot of their other like gun oriented and the sort of like Signar light version of trolls. To me, is I get why people like it. It's just I'm like but like being able to have a very thematic look and still like have that be all right is pretty cool. So I look forward to seeing more of what's coming out there, and then we're tying back into Circle here real quick. And again, what excites me for it is there was some really cool, some stuff's a little bit redundant, and there's some overlap within the faction, but there were some very cool ideas that were there. And all that does is, as this, like, and frankly, pun was not intended, frankly, as we keep going through things, I like that because I liked Trenchers because I thought they took this and they had some really neat new ideas. They had the blockhouse. Some of the solos are cool. I thought that what they were doing with the units was pretty neat. I still do. Solid additions to that. But really the blockhouse is the defining thing. For trolls, what I'm hearing is they basically have taken things that already exist and like just twisted them so they perfectly fit. Like I said, there's that unit with bears. There's another war. It's very similar to the war wagon, it sounds like, but also quite different. They talked about an attachment for the Creelstone, which is again very similar, but does some different stuff, very thematic stuff, and it's very cool to me. And this gives me hope for when we get. I'm still presuming Tharn is going to be first, but be that as it may, when we get Tharn or Blackclads or Wolfshorn, just how neat the direction that they can go with that should be. And I'm very excited for that. So I hope. I don't know exactly where in the cycle. I know Trenchers will end next Wednesday, I don't know if there'll be a break before Northkin. I don't know exactly what sort of timing they're looking for these. I could easily imagine them. They may be trying to get a couple in quick because Lock and Load's probably going to occupy a lot of their time. So they probably have time here in June to do that, with early July kind of full, and then at the end of July probably picking up. If I had to absolutely make conjecture, my guess would be after Trollbloods is Khador. After Khador might be Circle. We could be way down the line though too, so don't take any of that for. We've heard talk about some Crix, pirates, and some other things. So all conjecture on my part, but it would be really cool if that was the timing. So, be that as it may. So other announcements, we heard Company of Iron will be a standalone skirmish-sized game played on the Rumble mat with additional terrain, individual activations, alternating activations, sort of Privateer's response in a lot of ways to, things like Guild Ball, Infinity, Malifaux, and so forth, I think. We'll see what it looks like. The League was kind of fun. I'm sure they've got some twists on things. And again, if you play, it's going to be another way to use stuff you already have. Nothing bigger than a Light War Beast. There's no focus rules anywhere inside of it. Should be neat. So look for that. There's 2 new playable characters that'll be coming out with that as well. And finally, they announced No Quarter will be ceasing after I think issue 73, and will be rebranded as No Quarter Prime, releasing in September. And with that, they're going to be shaking up a little bit of what the content in them is. And largely, the big shakeup is basically that with the Scorn faction book, that will be the last command book, with the exception of annual faction releases. So I don't know what that looks like as of right now. A faction a year is a tall order. There's lots of people having there's lots of excitement. There's lots of people who have some concern with their current SKU bloat, for shops having to stock things, and like a new faction's not really going to make that better. So I sort of look to hear in the next year or so, I would expect to start hearing Privateer address that in some regard. I don't know if what that means is they're going to start retiring older things in their catalog, so that if you're at a store, you're buying newer things. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but I know store owners have. My LGS has talked to me about this concern. Players, we don't have that concern. We're like the more the merrier, but shops need to stock that. They need to be able to make money on it. They need to be, they need to move it and stuff like that. So we'll see on that. But excitement stuff. The other thing is, with no command books, all the rules that are released will be in there. So the Trencher, when the Trencher theme is released, it's going to be in that magazine. When the Northkin theme releases, it'll be in that magazine. Any other things that change in the CID will be in that magazine. So I think that's really cool. They're consolidating. It's $9, so it went up 50 cents. $9 every other month. If you think about it, any of those command books would usually cost in the 30-ish range for the soft cover, and for 6 months, $9. That's $45 a year, and for that you're going to get, a lot more books than those $35. And I don't know, maybe the themes were going to be smaller, but even if they were like $20, you're still talking about more like $200 if you were to buy all of them. So I like the change. I think they've had a lot of printed materials, and a lot of that has decreased with all of the digital, with War Room and stuff. So I think it's a great change for them. And for me, I'm more apt to buy a $9. I mean, I've been buying No Quarter since I started the game, so I'm more apt to buy a $9 No Quarter that mostly has like Signar and Khador in it, which would be a non-sale for me a lot of times. If they were to release like the Trencher book, I mean, like, that's cool stuff, but I'm not gonna go out of my way to spend $20 to $30 or $40 on that book. Probably some people would. But... all right, so that is the news and announcements that I have. There'll also be more fluff in there, just something I'm to recall. So looking to see, I didn't actually get any, I think I got one question on my last week post, and I apologize, I'm trying to find it. Lack of food crippled me a bit. Let me see if I can go through it this way. Apologies, team. There we go. Yes. Jacob from the Circle Group has a comment about making middling units good. Some seeing play, like the Shifting Stones, Sentry Stones. Some in themes, such as Tharn and Ambushing Wolves, and some that have well-known synergies, like Reeves with Tanith, I think it says, sorry. And some units that underwhelm, like Blood Pack. But in the middle there's a bunch of things that we just never really hear about. He lists Skinwalkers, Blood Trackers, Druids, and Wolf Riders. So how do we make middling units good? So let's talk about that a little bit. First, let me just throw out there, let's focus less on making something good and more on list construction, right? That's really what we're getting down to, is looking outside of the box when we're talking about list construction. And just the fact, and I think this really is good for Jacob, just the fact that he posted this question makes it seem like to me that he's thinking about these things, right? And a lot of times, this goes all the way back through my entirety in Mark II, there's stuff that's out there that you just don't hear about because it's not being played. Not because it's bad, not because it's certainly, isn't so overpowered that everybody's looking at it. People maybe feel it doesn't fit with a certain caster and a certain light or whatever. Sometimes people do think it's bad, and it's not, and they haven't tried it and haven't played it. So the question is, how do you make these things good, or how do you find a list to play them in where they fit? And the first thing I want to say is, there's a few things with this. So one, if you have a list that's working for you and it's playing, quote, top stuff, don't necessarily feel like you need to go change that to be a special snowflake, right? I think there's a lot of times to do that, but don't be guilted into playing something just because you feel like it's you're going to be giving an advantage just by playing the other unit. You're not necessarily. You may, but I just don't want anybody to feel guilty, like, oh, well, he's trying all these things and I'm not, and not everybody would, but just it is not necessary to make everything in the faction work. Some people want to do that, some people don't. Panning for gold, as it were, is sort of something people get really excited to try. I am actually one of those people, but if you're not that person, if you like to find a list and play it, it works for you, and you don't, and you only have a budget of so much, that's fine. So let's talk about a few of these units. So as far as like the middling, if you will, units in Circle, and I'll go over the ones that he lists. He talked about Blood Trackers, he talked about Druids of Orboros, Skinwalkers, and Wolf Riders. And I think those are all great examples of something that is, I think it's fair to call them middle, very average. We don't hear much about them. A lot of people don't really like them. Most people probably haven't even really played them, maybe a game or two. One exception there, Druids are starting to be on the rise, and I pretty much 100% blame Will Pagani because he played them at ATC, and suddenly people are like, oh, Pagani played Druids, and they're going out and trying them and finding that, hey, they're not actually that bad. But the real thing is, look at what your list is doing and you want every piece to fit. That's always been my thing. Like, what is its role in your list? So one of the things, for example, that I have at times looked at, say, Blood Trackers a little bit, but Wolf Riders certainly, is they're very fast and they're very flexible. They do a lot of different roles. So a lot of people, let me give you an example of something I did back in Mark II, and I'll explain why I'm using this example. In Mark II, I played the version of Chromac 2 that the aforementioned Will Pagani played, or a very similar variation of it, which was something along the lines of Chromac, Stalker, Getorix, Shadowhorn, Gorax, Druids, and so far that's pretty common. It was pretty common to run Druids with a heavy battle group with him because you could get the really big defense skew. So you started running this weird brick that was a defensive skew. And then Lord of the Feast was in there. There were Shifting Stones too, but Lord of the Feast was in that list. And a lot of people didn't understand what Lord of the Feast did. Now, this is Mark II Lord of the Feast. He's quite a bit changed, although he may still fit this role. But now with Chromac, because the way he plays is different now. The reason you put Lord of the Feast in that list was you have this brick, right? You got your brick. Baldur II, Baldur II is somebody who we still play with a brick, but you've got this brick of strong Warbies that sort of want to stay central to it because of the benefits that Chromac puts out there, and Mark II Chromac put out there, and you wanted to do that and sort of march up the table and get a spot on the scenario where you could either deny your opponent, force a heavy attrition play to your favor, and so forth. So what did Lord of the Feast do then, right? That's what you're asking yourself. And what he did was he picked his spot. He got into stuff that you normally couldn't just easily get into, and he would wreck it. And then you're like, oh, there's Lord of the Feast with 3 corpses sitting behind my line, and he's like a 12-17 stealth with 8 wounds. So there's this Lord of the Feast back there, and he could be Mat 10 with Carnivore. So there's this Lord of the Feast sitting back there. He probably got 3 corpses on him. Early on, you'd maybe like try to get a corpse too, because you used to be able to boost the bird. So you get him back there. He's got corpses. I don't know how many people played Lord of the Feast in Mark II, but a Lord of the Feast with 3 corpses can kill a lot of things you wouldn't expect he has any business killing. So you get him back there, and you're like, huh, I've got this Lord of the Feast back here. I gotta deal with that. But I've got this battle group that Chromac's in front of me, and I gotta deal with that too. And your opponent basically can't ignore the Lord of the Feast, so you're going to turn something around to deal with it. And that's one less thing that's going into your brick. That can be very strong. Fast forward to the point, if you will, because the story was to make a point. The point was sometimes when you have a brick, what you want is something else your opponent has to deal with. There can be a lot of strength there. Wolf Riders, especially, and to a lesser extent Mist Riders, also fall into this category. Or I think they do. I haven't played enough of them to 100% say this. They can both fall into the same category, and the reason being is that they're fast, and for the most part, 14-14 with 5 wounds is still pretty killable, right? That's not the stats that sort of inspire you to survive, right? If they can get a decently accurate, decently powerful shot on them, they're dead. They're not going to be safe. But, there again, if I have a min, maybe 2 min units of Wolf Riders, or maybe 1 max unit of Wolf Riders coming, around a flank, especially as we get into SR 2017, where some of the scenarios are much wider, much more spread out, and you want something that can harass a flank without really giving up a lot. They're going to be a very, very strong piece for that. And the reason being is Wolf Riders don't necessarily hit so hard that you have to worry about your heavies doing something, but you're probably going to still have to dedicate some resource to them at some point after, turn 2 or after, or they're going to be the thing that actually wins the game for you. You're going to, you can pretty trivially start killing support pieces. They can do very great work into other units. They don't terribly like any sort of really effective gun, but, it still is going to require at least 5 shots to take 5 out, or 3, however many there is. And if they're not dealt with, now you're looking at a scenario where you may, their caster, probably, while you may not be threatening their jacks, you may be threatening their caster. And the last thing they want to deal with is 3 extremely accurate Wolf Riders hitting, getting on them with assault throws and Power 9 Weapon Master attacks. That will kill casters, especially if that caster has to start camping focus, again, a win for you, because that's not focus going out to doing something else. So that's one example. So if you're playing Wolf Riders, and you try to send, this is Circle. If you take a unit that is finessey like that, and you just send them right up the middle with no terrain or nothing else to hide behind, you're gonna have a bad day. Both Wolf Riders and Blood Trackers excel, and Wolf Riders much more so now. The one thing is that Blood Trackers lost reposition in favor of Swift Hunter, which means they have to get a kill, which makes them much better into infantry than anything else, with the exception, I would say, of a couple casters, Tanith and Baldur 1, probably both a little bit of an exception there, just because of their spell list. But again, and that's a great example too. Look for strength. Blood Trackers will always be good with Baldur 1 because Stone Skin and Prey means you have POW 13 Weapon Master attacks. It's the equivalent of Ravager charges from 7 inches away, while also being immune to blast, and getting cover on his feet, and not being able to be knocked down. So they're not going to stop being strong there. So that's sort of the thing with them. Don't look to be like, well, I'm going to play this unit every list I have. Look for synergies. That's how you get units that people aren't playing and start putting them on the table and see what they do. Skinwalkers right now, we haven't talked a lot about them. I've had 2 ideas with them that I haven't had time to test. I've sort of been on a bit of the Ravager hype train myself. And for a variety of reasons, I would like to see, I don't know how many of you know this, but like painting stuff takes a while, and I can really only ask so much to get so much painted. And right now I'm focusing on Thard. But in a similar vein to the Ravagers being underrated, what I did there was looked, and this isn't my list, this was Colin Hill's list, but I looked for a place that they fit. One unit of Ravagers, in my opinion, is not that great in any of those lists I played. It's getting that actual second unit, and now your opponent might have had things that could deal with one unit of Ravagers, with the 6 to 9 models of Ravagers. Do they have one that can deal with what does that work out to be? 7, 14, 15 to 16 Ravager models? I doubt it. Depending on the list, of course. If it's armor that they need to crack, so it's getting better again for them. But so that's what I did with Ravagers. Now, if we talk about Skinwalkers, what do they have going on? They're already 12-16, which is a decently tanky stat line for infantry. They have Unyielding, taking them up to 18. So the first thing already, right, is armor buffs are going to be fantastic on them. Their mini feat's weird, but probably not something to dismiss. More importantly, though, they get Gang. And Gang is worse than the 2 attacks they used to have, but it does still mean they can go up to POW 14, which makes them the hardest hitting infantry we have natively. They hit 1 POW harder than Ravagers. What they give up for most of this is they only Pathfinder in the charge. They do have more wounds, but they're only speed 5, so you're talking about native 10-inch threats. So how do you make them good? Well, look at the list you're playing. They wouldn't... Ravagers, in my opinion, you're okay with taking a loss, and you're playing a very offensive game for the most part. Ravagers are going to go out there and kill stuff, right? They're a little defensive, using the tough and the no knockdown and etc., but that's kind of their game. Skinwalkers, on the other hand, are a bit more of the, like, I can live through more stuff, and then I'm still threatening enough to matter. So I sort of have seen 3 different places, and I don't know if I'm going to go through all these units, but I'm going to go through these couple. 3 different places you start looking for. You want somebody who increases their survivability somewhat. So for that, an armor buff is great. We have several unit-wide armor buffs. We have... so Grail is totally a natural place for them because they synergize with so much in his list. The feat means they can get into weird places. He can put Vengeance on them, making them incredibly accurate. We're talking about Mat 11 potentially with Wolford Marek. Like, Mat 11, POW 14. You're now taking out Legion heavies in the Fianna list, right? Like that list wants no part of that. Grail also gives them stealth for a turn if they need it, adding their survivability. Gets them into melee faster with Vengeance. They have 8 wounds, so just proccing like a single point on them is pretty much the worst because they're going to heal it, etc. Morvana 1, Chromac 1, Balder 1, Balder 2 maybe. It's a little bit of a weird play with him. Any of our +2 armor buff casters, with Morvana, it's not even ever going to be purified. And they're also still going to be good with anybody who is going to increase their melee power. So I've considered them with Tanith. And the reason there is so those, Ravagers don't have any like additional survivability pieces outside of the 13-15 tough no knockdown, and they get the Tree Walker. Skinwalkers, on the other hand, 12-16, they go up to 18 when you can get them stuck in, and they're going to take, it's going to be a lot harder to take one down on the approach. Add Scything Touch into that mix, and suddenly you're talking about POW 16 charges. Seems good to me. You get, POW 16 is what we were primaling Griffins to do, and you're going to get, depending on how you look at it, the unit is going to survive longer, and they don't threat as far, but they should be able to, in general, survive longer. You have more attacks, and you're not primaling anything. It gives you a lot of options. So Scything Touch, bringing up Affliction will help them hit when you need to. Her gun helps hit when you need to, stuff like that. So that's a place I've considered them. These are the type of things that you want to be looking for when you're gonna start looking at, like, what am I I want to play something other people don't play. Why don't they play it? And that's the other thing to certainly ask yourself too. When we talk about unplayable units, look at trying to figure out why it's not played. And if the answer is people think it's bad, try it. Because there's a lot of stuff that's like that. See what your list needs. See what you've been encountering a lot of. If you need more things that clear infantry, but you're finding what you're playing is dying, look for another unit. Circle's allegedly so full of infantry clearing that we get it by accident. And if you look at some lists, you can actually start to have a problem with it. Pardon. One of the issues I'm having right now, my Kaya 2 Kruger 1 pairing, is good in a vacuum. The problem is we don't play in a vacuum, and I have a lot of list chicken issues, especially with like Kador, where do I have to deal with Vlad's 80 rockets, or do I have to deal with Karchev's 80 warjacks? I want the Kaya list for the warjacks. I don't want the Kaya list in Vlad. In Vlad, I want Kruger, but Kruger wants no part of the 8 warjacks, and that's a big problem for me. I mean, we both have about a 50-50 of getting a matchup that swings heavily in our favor, and etc. So, and you can kind of game that and figure out, like, okay, well, they probably know that Kruger's really, really good into Vlad, and then they're going to know, like, well, the Warjacks is probably still better into Kaya than Vlad is, and they can play that kind of game. But I don't like going in and going like, well, I've got this really awkward list chicken where if I drop the wrong thing, I'm in trouble. I just don't like going into that. So I'm starting to explore some of these things. So be looking at that. Be looking at what you're seeing in your local area, or even if it's as high as like the global or con meta or whatever you want to call it. Look at what's being played and look at what your answers are to it. And if you look at it and you go, it's not going well, then adjust. Bloodweavers are great into anything where you're expecting to see a lot of tough models or Makeda 2 Battle Cats or anything like that. I really love Bloodweavers into stuff like that. just they have. Oh, and Blood Raiders are great into Ghost Fleet as well, which is right now obviously picking up steam. Look at things like that. Look at the rules they have and look and see what niche they fill and see if you need that niche filled. So, or if there's ways to exploit it. So the Druids have a knockdown effect, right? There's a lot of times you get a knockdown, some old weirds and a fulcrum unload on something, and that's a dead caster. Again, something you want to look at. So, I think we'll let that topic go at that point. But that's kind of how I sort of look at, when we're talking about these, quote, not really played stuff, is you want to look to start opening stuff up. Just try it. Go to your, if there's a unit that you're like, I don't know this unit, there's something to it, right? Skinwalkers, something there. Just find a way to throw them in a list that you like. Something that's going to, don't just throw them in any list, throw them into something you're like, well, Morvana 1, she's got an arm buff. I'm going to throw Skinwalkers in her list and just see how they do. Ideally play at least 5 games with it into a variety of things. See what happens. That's really the best way to go about things, I think. Don't be afraid to see, if there's an idea you have with it and you see, and try it. If you feel like, well, no matter what I do, I feel like I'm just going to be polishing this the whole time, right? Like that I'm doing these things where I'm to prop this up just to make it playable. That's okay if you really want to play that, but if that's not the case, keep in mind, like if you're doing all this work just to make this one thing better so you can play it instead of this other thing that's perceived as better, you may just want to play the thing that's better. But if not, you may find something that is really good that people have discounted. That's Devourer's Host is only starting to come around because a few people have played a bunch of games with it and went, no, this has a place. Same thing with Ghost Fleet. Ghost Fleet wouldn't have existed if somebody hadn't gone like, hey guys, play this with Denegra real quick and see what happens. And what happened was it wrecked a bunch of people. Alright, well, we haven't done this in a while. So I'm going to switch gears real quick. And we haven't gone back to kind of like what the show is about in several episodes now, it looks like. And we're going to talk about an entry in Circle, or 2, depending on how it goes. And we're going to start with the very last goat that we have to talk about. And that is... my war room not working. And that is the Gnarlhorn Satyr. So, the Gnarlhorn Satyr is a Circle Heavy War Beast. It is Speed 5, Strength 11, Mat 6, Defense 12, Armor 18, Command 5. It has a Horns attack, which is power 1-inch melee in all of its attacks. It has Power Strength 15, 2 Claw attacks that are Open Fists at Power Strength 14. It is Fury 3, Threshold 8. I believe it has 26, maybe 27 boxes. Let's see, 5, 8, 14, 18, 23, 26 boxes. It is 12 points. It is Field Allowance Unlimited, as all non-character war beasts tend to be. Its Animus is Earth's Blessing. It costs 1. It is ranged self. For 1 round, the spellcaster cannot be pushed, knocked down, made stationary, or moved by a slam. It also has Counter Slam, which is whenever an enemy model advances and ends its movement within 6 inches of this model and, in its line of sight, this model can immediately make a slam power attack against it. This model can use Counter Slam only once per round and not while engaged. Follow-up. When this model slams an enemy model immediately after the slam is resolved, this model can advance directly toward the slam model up to the distance the slammed model was moved. And Grand Slam, this model can make slam power attacks without spending focus or being forced. Models slammed by this model are moved an additional 2 inches. And he has, like all satyrs, he has Hard Head, which is that you can add the power of the head weapon to the 2 headbutt and slam attack damage rolls. So what is the place? So here's another piece. This is another piece where some would argue it's not middling, that it's bad. I'm not one of those people. So to talk about what is the Gnarlhorn going to do? Well, let's first talk about a few things. One, Counter Slam is a fantastic ability that is very, very difficult to make work. Reason being, unlike counter charges, where a charge can be any line that would end you in melee, slams have no option of that. They must be in a perfectly straight line toward the model you want to slam, and they have to go 3 inches or the slam won't happen. That's true for charges as well, but it's a little easier to get that 3 inches when you don't have to go in a perfectly straight line. So to get that slam, you're going to need a model to end greater than 3 inches away from you and less than 6, or 6 or less. It's a narrow window. There is one caster who really makes that happen, and that's Tanith. Because of admonition, you can stack admonition to trigger first and then do the slam. So they can end all the way in melee with you. As long as you have 3 inches of room to back up, you go back in and slam. And what the satyrs are kind of known for is they're all kind of they're all sort of ish based around the idea of power attacking. The Shadowhorn's based on throws. This guy's based a little bit more on slams. The Riphorn's a little bit more damage oriented, I would say, directly, but he still has bulldoze, and he's got some other mechanics that help with get you some power attacking. So point number 2 is Earth's Blessing is an extraordinarily valuable survival animus for a lot of lists where you wouldn't expect it. As soon as you take somebody like Akaya 3, who can get up to defense a lot during her feat, and you throw Earth's Blessing on her to make her no knockdown, no stationary, no push, that can be very strong. Now being able to be pushed is surprisingly strong. If you go up against somebody like, say, Kruger 2, which, circle for circle is maybe not the thing you need to plan for, but these models can't be pushed out of zones by his feet. It's a really good effect. Bulldoze, not going to stop. A lot of these things, and all for only 1 Fury. You can do the same thing with the Wold Watcher, but this guy's only going to cost you 3 more points, and you're getting a much higher quality piece. The Wold Watcher in some ways is going to be a little more survivable, but it's dealing with 2 POW 12s and a gun that's range 10 POW 12, only 2 Fury. If you have anything with Primal in it, the Gnarlhorn's automatically going to just be a better piece for you, in my opinion. That said, in the next piece is if you can buff him enough, we can start discussing the ability to trade War Beasts with Warjacks. A buffed Gnarlhorn will actually kill a Juggernaut, with the exception of some of the arm buffs in Khador. So let me repeat that real quick because I think it bears meaning. A buffed Gnarlhorn can, in fact, one round a Khador Heavy. Most Khador Heavies are coming in the 10 to 13 point in the melee. If they're being spammed, come in that 10 to 13 point range. If you can start using something like a Gnarlhorn Satyr to get those trades, you can start doing the trade efficiently. Now, let's just do the average math on that real quick. Several casters, because there's a few things. We're talking about a buffed Satyr here, so there's several things that have to come into play. We're assuming there's Primal in this list. A. B. We're assuming another damage buff exists. So to that end, we're talking the damage buffs in our faction for this purpose are Kaya 2, Kaya 3, Baldwin 1 technically, although I don't like the speed slowdown on a speed 5 thing already. Mosar, Wormwood have debuff spells. Uno, 2 special mention, and Tanith. And Chromac 2 with his feet. So we have a situation where we can give it plus 4 damage on all its attacks. Assume it can just get into melee for now because we'll start looking at the math of other things in a minute. But it's got a POW 15 initial and 2 POW 14s, and then can buy 3 more POW 15s. I hopefully mentioned Kaya 3 with synergy. Kaya 3 we'll dial these up the farthest. But so a Juggernaut is 1020 with 34 boxes. You're at dice -1 on 4 attacks. So that's 24 damage. And then you're dice -2 on 2 other attacks, which is going to be another 10. So that's 34 damage. That is by average, you will kill a Juggernaut. Add in a free charge or a little bit of other damage somewhere, and you will kill that Juggernaut. Just things to consider. So it gets really interesting, right? Does that work for me? Am I able, it doesn't threat the farthest at speed 5. There's not a lot of leeway there. That's like, just barely. If it's Kaya 3 and you have synergy maxed out, that +1 will be enough to do it. Obviously, like something like Sunhammer, getting some extra damage out there would be enough to do it. Things like that. So, I would say don't dismiss this beast. I think the Riphorn for 2 more points is going to, you're getting basically 1 more attack, a charge for free, and those 2 off attacks are giving you 2 extra damage. Not to be dismissed whatsoever. I think it takes buffs extraordinarily well. But I think the Gnarlhorn is going to give you some utility while doing it at the same time. Part of that being the Animus, part of that being the counter slam. So, I said it's incredibly difficult, and I think the better your opponent gets, the harder and harder it'll be. But the better you get, hopefully, the better and better you'll get at doing it. I think that the trick to using counter slam is probably that you can't just have one. Or you have to be extraordinarily great with your positioning. And I've played a couple matchups last weekend with Kai 3, running 3 of them, and I felt like it was starting to click already. I don't know if I'm going to keep playing that list or not at this point, but it was starting to click. I was starting to see it and starting to sort of work out the positioning, and I think there's a lot of strength there. I think one of those is strong with Kai regardless, just for the Animus, frankly. I do like the defensive profile of the Shadowhorn with her feet a little better. There's also some interesting things with being able to slam through get a slam on something and follow up through their army with her feet. I had fun with that against an opponent who didn't see it coming. But that's how we learn sometimes. So that's something with an Gnarlhorn. To me, you want something where you're going to be incentivized to take multiple beasts and save those points and use them to trade in interesting ways. So the list I played with Kaya, just for reference, was 3 Gnarlhorns, 2 Stalkers, Gorax, 2 Arguses, I think you still want something with her to start synergy going, but that was kind of the route I took. So, yeah. So, so that's kind of what the Gnarlhorn does, right? So you're going to want, the more I need to play them more, but the more and more you play them, I think the more you're going to be able to find those opportunities where the free slam is going to be really key. It's sort of one of those things when we talk about lists in the in the quote unquote dojo, where that sort of stuff gets dismissed a lot. It gets dismissed a lot in that people don't take those things into account until they're on the table. And yeah, you're not going to use a slam every game necessarily. You may start finding that you use it more and more games, but it's just one of those things where it's really hard to value some of those movement pieces until you get it on the table. So the throws from the Shadowhorn, the slams from this guy, power attacks that you can do in the end of charges, being able to trample a long ways, etc., are things that always feel like, well, I don't know when I would ever use that when you're talking theory. And the more you can sort of visualize the game as you're playing it, the better they'll get. But otherwise, there's nothing really exceptional about this. 1218 is a pretty standard, is like the most generic stat line that exists. The number of boxes is mediocre, I would say. Mat 6 is obviously just run-of-the-mill. But it's his ability to bring the Animus Earth's Blessing, which will be a huge blessing, pun intended, absolutely, in the lists that it's good in, as well as doing so while being something that can take Primal extraordinarily well. I'd much rather Primal up my 12-point heavy than my 17 to 21-point heavy. just how it is. So definitely something there to consider. But I don't have a ton there. You're going to want to try to take advantage of slams when you can. You're going to want to try to take advantage of the Animus when you can. You're going to want to try to learn more and more and more and more how to get counter slam angles set up ahead of time to really make your opponent. With more terrain coming into play too, this is only going to get better, right? Because if you can position your Gnarlhorn, because you know that they're going to have to come to a certain spot to say you've got, use my example, right? So we've got Kaya, and let's just assume I only have one at the moment, but and a Stalker, and I want my Stalker to live, but it needed to do work. And there's a building. Well, I know anything that's going to have to come into that Stalker, and they're going to want to kill it because it's a Stalker, is going to have to stop more or less right around that building, or it's not going to get to it. Well, I can put my Gnarlhorn, so I'm like, okay, if you come over there, I'm going to slam you. I'm at least going to try to slam you. And now you're banking all of this on me not hitting a 6 or a 7 on my attack roll. We'll see how that goes for you. Stuff like that. You're going to want to look for those type of things. And then you're just going to look and go, like, is slamming here the right thing to do? Maybe it is. Might help you be able to do more work into infantry. If you can slam like a cav model into some other models, those just knocking them down is gonna be pretty strong, because it means you can ignore them probably for a turn. And as open fists, so throws are still perfectly viable. Any sort of speed buff is going to be great for it, because it's it's natively threatening 9 inches. So things like Hunter's Mark, Dogpile, etc. are going to be strong there as well. So that is the Gnarlhorn Satyr. And at this point, I think we will probably keep it to just that. So, sorry for the delayed episode this week, and really sort of kind of all over the board content, but as I said, we'll try next week to get back to a little bit more consistent stuff. We'll see what news comes out of Privateer. I do still want to see, so if you listen to this and you have any opinions, I would be really, I think it'd be really cool to do the let's do it live list building. If anybody has any interest in that, let me know. Especially if you have, don't put all your ideas out there yet, but if there's a caster you think would be good to do this on, we're sort of looking into the panning for gold area more than the, we see lists for this stuff every week area. Anyways, as always, I'd like to thank my sponsor, Griffin's Roost Painting, always providing me with awesome painted stuff, and if you're interested in getting something painted, check out griffinsroostpainting.com or Griffin's Roost Painting on Facebook. And if you have something that you want painted extraordinarily well, she can hook you up. So take a look at that. And as always, I'm Cheddar Caveman on all of the social media, so if you have any questions, just hit me up there. And thanks for watching.